With 4 years starting at the beginning of Apex Legends competitive, the best of the best were defined by 2 words: power and ego. It wasn't enough to be the best. You had to show the world, again,
they're just a setback here for TSM. Who is going to do it? TSM!
Zero's gonna do it! They are your champions!
and again,
Sounds good down from the heavens!
And now, DarkZero is going to be your champions!
and again.
Stop takeover! TSM! But no! Here comes Zero! To send it back down under!
And through this, the story we have all come to know arose. The story of 2 dynasties, TSM and DarkZero. A jockeying of power and a bolstering of ego to determine not who else may rise to glory, but who among them would retain the title. But then, just as it seemed like the dynasties were too big to fail, in year 4, everything
And they
changed.
know this is the best opportunity they will ever get at lifting that trophy. Everything falling into place for Reject Winnity right now. It's a massive moment for Apex. As Reject Winnity will be your champions. It's the golden opportunity. Alliance, who are touted as group stage players, the boys that could never get it done, the boys who always struggled in finals, have this game in their hands, and it's now their chance. As Alliance will do it! As the G go forward, they take damage. Alliance still as a duo, by the way. Might be dropping here. Unlucky on his own. Won't win it, but SSG will become your champions here in Germany. GoNext now. See the bubbles go down and they send the camel down as well. They split the zone. Surely, LG and VSP have to engage. No, the slam for VP, but GoNext will hold. Looking to claim that the GoNext will win it. They are your ALGS Championship champions here in the world.
The old way was gone, and the game that had once fostered the rise of these 2 empires was forever changing. And the first dominoes began to fall. The dynasties collapsed, new champions arose, and the skill of their opponents was rising too. But not just that, the whole game was adapting around them. The advantages they had always had on their sides as kings of the hill were fading.
You guys
And
can
new
suck.
systems that were built to explode the towers they had built their legacies on, had finally begun to arrive.
Hey Legends, today I'm here to explain the new ALGS POI Draft system. This format change aims to even the playing field.
What? Oh, I hate that pick. I genuinely do.
At this point, why don't you just give us random characters too?
Actually, the most picked legends throughout the series will get banned. This legend ban is the best thing that's ever happened to LGS.
So I'm Burke, talking all things competitive Apex. Subscribe if you like that sort of thing, and let's talk about the Apex Legends Global Series, and why their new format going into year 5 is going to make this the hardest year in Apex Legends history as a competitor. So let's take a step back, because to understand why this year is going to be the hardest year in Apex Legends history, we need to understand why these 2 dynasties were able to get such consistent results in the first place. Especially in a game where there are 160 teams competing every Pro League season, there are 40 teams competing every tournament, and there's 20 teams competing in each match, all vying for that same first place position 3 times every year. And one of the most impactful factors is RNG. Anyone that's ever played a Battle Royale knows that randomness is a staple of the genre. All sorts of things can be random. Things like what guns spawn and where, the armor you can find, attachments, and even broader things like what path the dropship takes, which changes who can loot their spots first, and where the zone pools, determining who has to travel the furthest to get a shot at winning. These are called RNG, or random number generation, referring to the code that generates these outcomes. These elements are purposeful to the game. They ensure that things are constantly changing so that advantages shift to different teams. It is meant to build flexibility, to give anyone a shot at success. But with every map and POI or point of interest on the map, all RNG is not built equal. Some landing spots on the map had rotation tools, such as balloons or tridents, or just had better position on the map, which helped negate the RNG of end zone pools. TSM and DarkZero both took advantage of this. On World's Edge, they would land on central POIs with balloons so that they could quickly rotate to anywhere on the map. And when it came to Stormpoint, a map with a lot of elevation, TSM used the high ground to their advantage, landing at wall, which meant that they had an easy rotate if the zone pulled just above them, but if it didn't, they had downhill rotations to get anywhere. And for DarkZero, they claimed the mill, which, while it was on the low ground, gave them access to a trident so that they could drive to their spots even faster. To get ahead of the competition, teams even picked up Analysts, meaning that they knew which spots on the map were the best to land at to guarantee any type of advantage at the very start of the game.
I'm not doing manually anything. Some people go to collect zones manually, right? Into custom game, they go into war streams and so on, limiting the RNGs. Spawn rates of every single thing. I do not do that. I do that everything automatically. When we were in the search of a POI in the past, it was a mill. We weren't going mill before. And then when I went, I was like, okay, that's the loot, that's the consoles, that's the things, that's the rotations, and so on. I like this POI.
Analysts were revolutionary for teams early on in their ability to figure out really important things that some teams just simply couldn't discover. But not everything were back-end or data mining secrets, or things that needed thousands of games to replicate. Just about everyone in competitive and even in higher ranks knew things like that the middle bins and mill had a guaranteed purple armor, or the center platform and harvester had a guaranteed gold armor, helmet, knockdown, or bag. So it's no coincidence that these played a role in DarkZero's selection of those spots. On Stormpoint, the addition of wildlife also added a way to reduce that RNG. You can grab a gun and shoot some prowlers, and you'll get smart loot, which gives you loot upgrades specific to the loadout you're running. TSM and DarkZero both had this advantage too, with prowler nests directly next to wall and mill. But once you're playing the game, one of the most crucial factors to this RNG was where the ring was going to pull and where people were around you. And this is where the ring console and survey beacon come in. The ring console tells you where the next zone is going to pull, and the survey beacon tells you where players on the map currently are. The console has been a staple since the beginning of the game, but the survey beacon was a later addition. Regardless, the locations of these and the rate at which they spawn was a massive element to where people chose to call home. Teams that had analysts were able to discover clear discrepancies in the spawn rates of certain ring consoles and beacons. This information was a clear advantage to those teams, because it meant that by securing these POIs, you were statistically more likely to know where the next ring might pull, where people are on the map, and get a high priority position for the endgame. Now, there are more than just these ways to mitigate randomness. There are a lot of strategies to employ and things to consider. And in almost every case, you can bet that these two teams were doing the best job at managing it. But it wasn't enough to just know these things. That alone couldn't secure you the best POI. You had to fight for it.
They're on our right, above us. We're beating them for sure. Pretty even right now. We're pretty even.
Contesting was a core element of Apex Legends competitive since its conception. If you wanted the best spot on the map for the tournament, you had to fight for it. This often took place in the form of either direct 3v3s, where the two teams landed in the same nearby area and fought immediately upon landing, or in the drawn-out split landings, where teams looted different halves of the POI before either converging on each other to fight, or going separate ways if the fight was drawn out. For these contests, teams had designated jump masters that would skydive for the team to get there the quickest, making sure that they get the advantage of getting guns first.
I think we're getting hard beat. We have to lane on the side.
Yep. Do that. One right bin.
Left bin. I don't have a gun. I don't have a gun. On my back.
Some teams changed entire legend compositions to have legends better suited to win the fights, completely neglecting the impact it had on the rest of the game's performance.
Get the last kid. Did he Q me? One shot conduit. I'm gonna arc him. I naded it. I'm queuing up. Running away. By door.
That's my third one. I bounced in there and fucking conduit.
We are also seeing, in my opinion, definitely comps being built for contests, because with all due respect to CLG, Revenant has not been prevalent.
These contests could last weeks, if not months, with some persisting through multiple Pro League splits. Some spots on the map were simply far better than others, and if you wanted that spot to yourself, this was the only way to get it. Contests were a pillar to success for any major team, and they played out something like this. Before a Pro League season starts, there were sets of practice matches called Scrims. In these Scrims, teams would contest over and over again, day after day, to assert dominance and show the other team that landing there would mean a bad performance if they tried it on a match day.
Let's fucking go, boys!
And sometimes this would be enough, with teams opting to land elsewhere entirely when the match day came. But in other cases, sometimes teams just wouldn't go.
I don't even care about winning the LAN. I just want to beat TSM off drop.
And if this happened, it could have devastating effects, sometimes causing teams to not qualify for a tournament, lose out on earnings, and even potentially leading teams to fall apart. But contesting didn't stop there. Winning your position in your region meant nothing to the teams on the international stage. Once you begun preparing for a LAN, the contests began all over again, this time with millions of dollars on the line.
We're also going to be expecting here TSM versus Wonton Dumpling.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's the main event, right?
Big E with those huge PK shots as TSM come out on top once again.
And this is what TSM and DarkZero did so well. They won contests over and over again, scaring off potential competitors even in the international stage. They were persistent. Even if they lost for days back to back, they never left.
I just can't do anything, bro. Like, how did you die? We're doing this. I'm already dead. Bro, like, Jordan, what? What are you?
And when there was a chance to make sure that their competition couldn't qualify for a tournament or for a finals lobby in that tournament,
Molly wants spam finishing.
they would even sabotage those teams' games on other maps.
DZ landing on Aurora at Shipfall.
What the is going on?
They don't want Aurora in the winner's bracket. They don't want to be contested on World's Edge, so they want to wipe them out now. Go into that winner's bracket. They will then have Harvester to themselves on World's Edge when we get further into that winner's bracket.
Zero does not want them coming back.
But the biggest deterrent for other teams was that no matter how many times they were contested, they would still win. Again and again and again. This is how these teams established their dominance. Once they staked the claim for the POI they want, very few teams would try to take it from them. And those that did went on to regret it. But all good things come to an end. And for them, the first dominoes started to fall with changes to some of the RNG that traditionally gave them such an advantage. From the start of the game, players dropped without any form of shield. They would gain their white, blue, purple, and gold shields solely through finding them on the map. In Season 4, Respawn added Evo shields to the game, another form of ground loot that instead leveled up when you dealt damage wearing it, which could go all the way to the red level at 125 HP, 25 more than purple and gold. In Season 6, these shields replaced the regular white, blue, and purple shields altogether, but all versions of them could still be found on the map. By Season 9, players started spawning with white shields, granting 50 more HP at the start of the game than normal. But finally, in Season 20, they decided to remove armors altogether from the loot pool, so that the only way now to get higher armor levels is through damage or other Evo farming mechanisms. From this point forward, the advantage of getting a guaranteed purple armor immediately after landing was gone, and those POIs like Mill that could previously offer that perk had now lost that value. What followed from there were even more reductions to the value of individual POIs over others. Where there were previously massive loot disparities between them, the introduction of support bins granting more heals, assault bins granting more smart loot, and evac towers allowing for further rotates from any POI, along with the 100% spawn rates for survey beacons, the advantages for any specific POI over another had continued to dwindle. And these elements, chipping away at the advantages of the best POIs in the game, combined with the growing skill across other competitors, finally came to a head in Year 4, when Reject Winnity kicked off an entire year in which neither TSM or DarkZero claimed the title, and even saw both teams finally separating, as the in-game leaders of both teams joined together to join the supposedly super team, the Falcons, which also in that same year could not bring home a title. But by far, the biggest nail in the coffin for these two teams came in Split 2 of Year 4, the introduction of the POI Draft. Regardless of the dwindling value of specific POIs over others, there were still statistically POIs that were just much better. But under the new POI draft format, rather than teams dropping from the dropship, flying to their spots, and fighting over the places they want, teams would now drop directly above the POIs they select, with them being drafted completely outside of the game. The new draft format allowed for every team to have an equal shot in Pro League at taking the best spots on the map. And there was nothing other teams could do about it. With the draft taking place across 2 maps in a snake draft method, this also meant that the teams having the best spots on the first choice would get a worse one on their second. The playing field was leveled for all teams regardless of their previous status. Whereas before, for contesting, you could have the best spot on both maps, now you could only have the best spot on one, and you have no control of which match day you get that. Now, your performance in Pro League did affect your draft order for the tournaments, and within the tournament itself, you earned better draft position throughout the stages, but the starting point of every split from now on, everyone from Grand Champion to new entry team was standing on equal ground for the first time in history. So, in the first few years of the game, this RNG made the competitive scene rather lawless.
Snipe down is brought back into the game. He's only got an heirloom to work with.
If you wanted something, you could just take it.
Zero hit Ranches with the... Ranches, how come you aren't talking so much now?
And if you were the strongest teams contesting that best POI, it could be yours. And the advantages of having a better start, combined with the wider variability of loot in the early years of the game, meant that teams that got ahead stayed ahead. This still took a tremendous amount of skill to achieve, but once earned, it became much harder to dethrone.
Bro, these guys are so bad. Oh my god.
TSM is just way too good of Alpha Cypher, man. Like, I don't think anyone will take TSM out of their POI. Anybody in the world.
At this point, that age was over. If you had noticed before, I mentioned that some of these teams have analysts, which help them with ingesting information and informing decisions. But many of these teams also have coaches, which help them sort out important decisions, strategize, and make improvements to their overall gameplay.
He just keeps us organized. You know, we have a Discord with all our POIs, all our rotations, all our loot spots. You know, how we get together a couple times a week just to discuss, you know, where our heads are at, what comps we want to run, what other teams are doing around us, so we can focus more on the gameplay side of things. The fact that it just saves us so much time to focus on what we need to focus on is a huge bonus for us as a team.
But in the early years, these things were a luxury, not a necessity. Having the knowledge of the best POIs was just something that came with playing the game, and players were generally expected to know what the best decisions were, the best legends, and the best guns to run in any new patch. But with competition rising and the introduction of the POI draft, meaning that you might not get the spots you're familiar with, along with the introduction of a third competitive map, E-District, added for Year 4 champs, this addition of one of these, if not both, to a roster became a necessity. Analysts such as Privacy for DarkZero and coaches like Raven for TSM were large contributors to the success of these rosters. And with all of the recent changes, it wasn't too long until these other teams started to follow suit.
Raven, he set the standard for what you want to see from a coach, the way that ideas of how you want to play the games. And he put us on to Nick, our current coach, or ZZ.
So that's it. That's everything that changed going into Year 4. And you can see why, even with just scratching the surface of all the different elements they've added and changed to ALGS, that Year 4 was easily the hardest year for Apex Legends we'd had for competitors. And it makes sense why a different team won every tournament that year. The competition is tighter than it's ever been, and now with so many new changes happening, everyone is on closer footing than they've ever been before. With Year 5 continuing with all of those changes implemented, it's no wonder why it's going to be the hardest year for competitors we've seen to date. But the craziest part is, that's not where the changes end. You see, after Year 4 concluded, the ALGS came out swinging, with 3 new changes that added with the others just might create the most competitive, dynamic, and frankly just difficult year of Apex competitive that we might ever witness. World's Edge is gone. The oldest competitive map still in rotation has been replaced with a map, while originally released for mixed reviews, was revamped in Season 21 with an emphasis on player feedback and a higher consideration for competitive viability, with many going as far as to say it's ready to take the competitive stage, and with others disagreeing entirely. With the Year 5 announcement, it was officially added to the rotation for competitive maps, meaning that along with E-District, which was only introduced at the Year 4 champs, Year 5 will start out with 2 maps making their first regional Pro League debuts. Whereas the tournament structure was previously a playoff at the end of each Pro League split and a championship following the Split 2 playoffs, the structure for Year 5 has removed the Split 2 playoffs in order to prevent a large gap that normally occurs between the tournament and the championship itself, instead choosing to hold a kickoff tournament at the start of the year. Now, this is still 3 tournaments, and at first glance it doesn't move the needle much for difficulty, but that's if you don't look at the kickoff tournament itself. The ALGS Open this May, unlike a normal playoff, hosting 40 qualified teams who played consistently throughout Pro League to qualify, is instead open to all 120 teams in Pro League, and an additional 40 that will qualify separately from the preseason qualifier tournament series. And where normally these tournaments traditionally have a group stage, elimination bracket, and finals to allow for consistency to prevail throughout the tournament, due to the size of the tournament, the format will instead be double elimination, meaning that falling to the bottom 10 in only 2 sets will see a complete elimination from the bracket. Combine this tournament structure with its large contestant pool and the fact that placement in it contributes to your chances at going to the Year 5 championship, and this shapes up to be a tough tournament series that is going to truly show who has what it takes. Lastly, and what perhaps was the most shocking news to the competitive scene, was the introduction of the most revolutionary change to the game the pros have ever seen: a legend ban system. Every set in Pro League or in a tournament, there are typically 6 or 8 games. Under this new system, in the first game of every set, the most picked legend in that set will be banned from being selected in all subsequent games. What this means is that if Bangalore is the most picked person game 1, she will not be allowed to be played for any of the remaining games in the set. This in and of itself is game changing, as teams have to adapt to the way the legend meta shifts as the best character is removed from the pool. But this doesn't just happen after game 1. This happens after every game in the set. This means that in a 6-game set, as is normal for Pro League, at the end of every set, there will be 5 characters banned going into game 6. In game 1, if Catalyst is the most picked player, she'll be banned for the second game. If in the second game, Newcastle is the most picked legend, then Catalyst and Newcastle will be banned for game 3. This continues until game 6, where 5 legends total are completely banned from that game. This sets the stage to completely change the way the game is played throughout every game of the set. Whereas historically legend metas dominated sometimes entire splits, with 3 to 5 characters being picked in total throughout, now we are seeing upwards of 10 to 12 characters being picked throughout a single set. And this to me is going to be one of the hardest adjustments that pros will have to make. And it will be one of the biggest tests that separates good teams from the greats. It no longer matters if you can shine only on one POI on the map, or if you are only good with certain characters that just happen to be good. To be a champion in Year 5 means that you can win from anywhere. You can win playing anyone. And to be the champion in Year 5, you have to truly be the best. So in Year 5, could we see new dynasties form around the Year 4 successes? Will we see new champions answer the call? Or, under a new world order built to give any competitor a chance at greatness, will we see the dynasties of old emerge under new banners to prove that even if anyone can have the chance, only a few have what it takes to claim it?